Okay, super. Let's kick this off. I'm very excited. This is our first COMMB Talks panel of 2022. And we've got a great panel of experts. But first and foremost, I do want to introduce my co-moderator, Jason Pfeiffer, who is the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine and an author who's got a book coming out September 6th. So Jason, hello, welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of, I know your very busy schedule.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to give a bit of a background intro on yourself? That would be great.
Sure. Just I know I'm everyone's really excited to get into the subject of this, so I'll just keep it quick. My name is Jason Pfeiffer. I'm the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, as you just said, and I am a podcast host, a startup advisor. I do some television development, and I've got this book that's coming out, which you may hear a little bit more later, called Build for Tomorrow. And the reason that I wrote it is very much for, I think, all the reasons that everybody is interested in this conversation today, which is that we are all going through a crazy rapid change. And I hope we know, I think the most forward thinking of us know that there is a lot of great opportunity on the other side of that change, great opportunity along that change, but it's hard to see. And what I found is that sometimes the hardest part about change is that people see loss a lot easier than they see gain. Something changes, we immediately know what we're losing, what comfortable thing we no longer have access to, and we don't exactly know what the gain is going to be. And so I think we always need to be thinking and having conversations exactly like the one that we're having today, where we can start to help identify what that gain is so we know the direction to move towards. And that, of course, means doing a whole lot of things, shifting your mindset, thinking differently about how you can provide value, and hearing from people who really know it best, who are in the weeds, which is exactly what we're doing today. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Great intro. We also have Christine Smith, who is the head of marketing at Hyundai Canada, joining us today. Very excited to hear your perspective. Christine, do you want to give a little intro?
Yeah, I'm Christine Smith. I joined Hyundai about 10 or 11 months ago. I joined them from their advertising agency, so I probably bring a unique perspective to some of the client and advertising questions we'll hear today, because I spent most of my career actually on the agency side, cross mediums, as well as from an integrated perspective. And then obviously Hyundai Canada, we sell cars. We consider ourselves a leader in mobility and full range of solutions, both traditional powertrain and electrified, available in Canada.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we've also got Jason Harris, who is president of Digital Dealership Solutions and Matador. Jason, welcome.
Thanks. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Very excited. Do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. Look, I've been in the car business. I'm a car guy. Been in the car business for almost 20 years. I've worked pretty much every single role within operations and marketing, from single rooftops to large dealer groups. I was dealer principal. I owned a dealership. Then I moved over to the dark side. I became a vendor. And yeah, I've been running a marketing agency now for the last 7 years, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Matadors are my newest kind of venture, helping startups kind of get off the ground, get them into market, and develop out their operations and marketing strategies.
Very good. And last but certainly not least, we have Gina Gordon joining us, who's the founder and CEO of Lucit. Gina, welcome.
Thank you. I sound a lot worse than I feel. I developed some sort of itis on the plane a couple days ago. So just thank God I can't give it to any of you.
I'm very happy you're feeling better.
Right. As Amanda said, I'm Gina Gordon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lucit. Our company has created an out-of-home platform for clients to be able to directly control their digital billboard campaigns on their phone. We also directly connect into dealer management software, inventory systems. We also do that for real estate and basically anybody that has a sophisticated backend system that we can pull in inventory from and automate creatives on out-of-home screens.
Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So guys, I'm going to kick it off here. Let's start big picture. The automotive category has always been a big one for the out-of-home industry, but we know lots of things have changed. So even what worked before may not work now. Why is automotive such a hot topic right now, post-pandemic? There's obviously a lot to touch upon there with inventory, high demand, shifting marketing strategies, but talk to me about why this is the subject we need to be focused on right now. And who I don't know, how are we gonna do this? Who's gonna take it first? I'll just kick it off. Let's say Christine.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a number of reasons. I think that the pandemic has created major challenges within the supply chain, chip shortages. We've all read the news, and yet a shift in behavior for consumers as well, more towards maybe some who didn't have personal vehicles historically were sharing or using public transit, actually saying, maybe I want to have that option in some cases. And so we've seen demand rise as a result. So there's that, and then you add in the shift towards electrification. And we've seen this kind of major tipping point kind of reached in Canada, where now more people than aren't looking at alternative powertrains, electrified vehicles as their next vehicle option. So you see a major shift in terms of the type of vehicle folks are looking for. Then just add in the crazy gas prices and all of that, kind of throwing gasoline on that. And then you look at some of the new entrants in the market and the amount of disruption the industry is facing in terms of how we sell to service and support our customers through their ownership. And so I think it's a hot topic because there's no industry being disrupted on as many fronts as automotive is right now.
Gina, I'll move this on to you. Christine, that was a great overview. Gina, maybe a good place to start is, what are you hearing from your clients who are using this platform, this technology that you have, about why it matters to them so much now? Oh, I think we went mute. There you go.
Good. I think that really what this inventory shortage has done has really made these dealers, at least at the local level, sit down and try to kind of revisit their entire marketing strategy, cut the fat on everything that they're doing, and figure out what they really perceive to be working for them. I think that's really an important thing. I also think with the new privacy regulations that have been coming out with Apple and everything else, I think that they're willing to take a fresh look at out of home in a way that they didn't do before. And there's all this emerging tech for out of home that they can be using that maybe they didn't even know existed. So I think that that's what we're seeing, is a lot more excitement in this space and a renewed interest. And that's really exciting for media owners.
Yeah, oh, that's super interesting. Jason, what do you think? You've got a long memory for this industry, being in it as long as you have.
Look, the last 24 months, disruption is a great word. I probably used that word more in the last 24 months than I have my entire life prior to it. And the word pivot. That's another word I never thought I would use 100,000 times in 24 months, but I probably have. But no, seriously, though, the last 24 months has been very challenging for the dealerships as far as an operational change. Look, we're an industry that doesn't typically change quickly. And here we are, we were thrown into a position where there wasn't an option. We didn't have an option. We had to change, and we had to change quickly. And the core of that change was really our communication. The way we communicated, to customers. A, that's one. B, look, we have provided or created a sales process. For since the beginning of selling cars, we've had a 12-point sales process. Well, customers don't want a sales process. So in 24 months, not only do we have to change the way we communicate, to the customer, but we also know how to provide a buying process. But not just one. We had to provide 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different versions of what a buying process is to a customer, because that's now what the expectation is. Look, it's exciting when the industry gets hit kind of across the face, almost like a right hook with this much change. And now you're looking at the inventory levels, which is still kind of keeping that snowball of change going. My biggest concern is that inventory levels come back and that change effect doesn't stay. So you're seeing right now, kind of within the automotive space, is who the real operators are. What's that old saying, that the cream really does rise to the top? And that's who you're seeing. You're seeing people that are being incredibly proactive, all right, that aren't looking at 30-day cycles like we typically do in the automotive space. We're looking at now 6-month, 9-month, 12-month cycles, because that's what some of the vehicle orders or ordering schedules are looking like. It's a very, very interesting time. And then you top off all of that with the cherry on the top. And as an industry, we've never made more money. We've made more money now than we've ever have. So you have the snowball of change, you have this demand from the customer for difference in communications and a buying process, not a sales process. And then you put this cherry on the top, we're making a crap load of money. How that all just kind of affects the industry, it's in a very exciting, little nervous, but it's also a very exciting time, yes.
My hope is it's lasted long enough that we've created
That it sticks.
right? That it sticks, right? Because sometimes when it's like a flash in the pan, when we first went home in March 2020 for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and it was like, this is all just, everyone's going to go back to normal. There was all these articles about remote work and all of this stuff. And you know what, in April, we'll all be back in the office and we'll forget this ever happened. And here we are 2 years later. And so when we think about that buying process and the dealers having to really think about how they sell to their customers in such a different way, because they couldn't kind of coax them into the dealership anymore. They had to kind of figure out a new way. That behavior, I think, is pretty sustained now. I think the customer was ready for it long before we were. It's been 2 years. That's going to stick, and the cream at the top, they know it. They've changed their systems. They're adapted. The thing that is kind of a slightly newer issue, but probably one that's going to sustain for a bit, is the wait for cars, right? It used to be that you'd go in, you'd buy a car, a couple of days later, maybe 6 weeks if you were waiting for something really brand new or really exclusive, would arrive, you'd go and pick it up. It was relatively easy and quick. Now you have customers waiting 3, 6, 9, 18 months for a car and willing to wait that long for the car that they want. How dealers retain them and take care of them during that time, I think, is going to create that long-term customer loyalty that they ideally want to create, that before used to happen over 3 days, a week, 2 weeks. Now it's happening over 9, 18 months.
Yeah, now a dealer has to communicate to the customer over 8 to 19 months. That is not something that we're typically used to. And honestly, it's actually not something we're necessarily equipped to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like
that's actually a really good point. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. If I could just jump in and ask kind of a pointed question relative to that customer loyalty and retention. So as it pertains specifically to the communication strategies, you've mentioned that you've had to shift how you're focused on your communications channels, but also like the approach that you're taking to marketing and advertising. So I'm curious, how do we as the out-of-home industry win over automotive brands to leverage out-of-home from not just a mass reach or awareness component, but also from that tactical communication and sort of recurring touch point within your consumer journey that helps to manage that retention period during this sort of supply chain challenge that we're working through?
It's tricky, right? It's not a medium typically associated with something that is more personalized and one-to-one. So how can technology help us get a little bit closer? How can we get a little bit more localized, maybe where there is inventory? But I do think it has an important role to keep a brand and a product top of mind as well, because there's so much out there now. And again, I talked earlier about the new entrants in the industry. There's so much out there. How do we keep our brands top of mind? Because the news cycle is always really enamored by kind of the newer players, right? And so mass and awareness still has an important role in our strategy.
But I think you nailed it on the head when you said the word brand. Right? Look, we don't need to be marketing biweekly payments anymore. We don't. In fact, I'll be honest, we really should.
Brand loyalty, brand affinity.
There's never been a better time to be an automotive marketer, right? We're finally 100%. Allowed to, like, the gloves are off. We're allowed to kind of do brand. Yeah.
Yeah, we can actually do what we want to do. We don't get these ad mats that say, okay, $59 a week or biweekly this, which I always thought was kind of funny, because I've yet to ever go to a dinner party where someone finds out I'm in the automotive industry and I'm like, oh yeah, what kind of car did you buy? Well, that was a $249 biweekly one. Never told me that.
That's actually an interesting sort of transition, because you mentioned that the use of out-of-home from a brand perspective, but there's also a tactical component in leveraging out-of-home, particularly with respect to the onset of programmatic digital out-of-home. And so, Gina, I know you leverage a lot of automation within your platform and within your tactics that you're working with some of the dealers. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you're working in the automation component and sort of the programmatic piece?
Right. I think for out of home and for auto dealers, measurement is huge. Automotive brands have been catered to forever since advertising began. They've been catered to. Tech was built around them. All the online marketing was built around them first. Clients try to sell them first. What this means is that the automotive industry is no stranger to these analytics. And really what the out-of-home industry needs to do is to step up and provide them a similar experience as they're getting from every other medium that they buy. And that tech exists. They need to provide them with engagement, to the ability to engage with their digital billboard campaigns, real-time analytics, and truly dynamic digital. And that's what we provide is this truly dynamic digital where we have a connection, think Auto Trader, Car Gurus, things like that. We connect right into that. You bring in this inventory and all the data real time. So as it changes in the dealer management software, the creatives are updated every minute on the out-of-home screens. So these auto dealers then can run hundreds, thousands of creatives, and they can control it all like a remote control from their phone. And that's really what we bring to the table, and what we think is how we're going to be able to win over those auto dealers, because out of home isn't just long-term branding, and it shouldn't be seen that way. It can compete. It's not going to be Facebook. It doesn't need to be. It's not going to be Google, but it can be what it is, and it's very special anyway.
So Gina, you're bringing us into a great area of conversation, which is the technology that can help optimize this kind of advertising. I'd be curious to just hear a little bit more, either from Christine or Jason, about what you're seeing as real opportunities here to optimize, in this moment.
I think to optimize as far as marketing technology, look, the vehicle is no longer the commodity. The vehicle is no longer what the message is. Then the message is the experience in the process. Like Hyundai did a great example. Early on, you guys partnered up with Moto Insights, an amazing digital retailing product, and immediately went right to market, not with a car, but with an experience and a process. Mm-hmm. And I think that done amazing things. Hyundai is still one of the few OEMs out there. If I buy the car, I can actually get notifications from Hyundai as the build process is going out. I made a post the other day. I bought a pair of Nikes. They were Air Force Ones, orange, obviously. I kind of like orange. And they send me notifications of as my shoes are being built. There's only a handful of manufacturers that can actually give me that kind of update on a $60,000 to $70,000 purchase, but Nike can give it to me on a $100 purchase. Bravo, by the way, Hyundai, you can do that. Tell Dawn I said that.
Yeah, I will. I'll pass on the message. No, it's become critical, right? Because these customers are kind of calling and wondering what's happening with their car, and we have the information. The dealers will start to get information at a certain point, but up until that point, we're the only ones who kind of know where in the pipeline something is, and we want to take care of our customers, and we want this unfortunate lengthy journey to get to a new car to be one that's at least not wrought with a complete lack of information and contact, right? That's kind of CRM 101. And
that's a process
built that as quick. What's that?
That's a process a customer wants to get into. Like if I got to wait 6 months, what happens?
Yeah. Well, and we're building onto it. We just launched with Ioniq 5, but my team is shooting a bunch of videos right now. We're basically kind of taking them inside with some of our product team to help them learn about their new vehicle and get them excited, and exclusive content. So we didn't stop just with the notifications. We're building onto it because, again, we're in these unprecedented times that aren't going anywhere anytime fast. So why not make it the best possible experience we can? We want to take care of our customers, and that's what we're going to do.
And then Jason, going back to your question about technology. I mean, Hyundai is a great example. I'm so glad you're here because you're looking at new companies in the automotive space like Tekion. All right, a company that's bringing data, and making it open to every single source out there. Half the problems for marketers out there is just getting access to the dealership's data. A lot of times, no one even knows who owns the data. Does the dealership own it? Does the DMS, the dealer management software company, do they own it? Does the OEM own it? And how does that data actually shared back? We know we can build a better marketing experience if we can get that data. It's cool because as an automotive, I think we're entering into the the decade of what I'm going to call them data consciousness, right? Dealers are becoming aware, all right, of what data is available to them and what they can do with it and how it can impact their marketing efforts. So it's a pretty cool time.
Yeah, I think to kind of go back to your question as well, and what's really cool about what Gina's been talking about and what her company is offering is all of my decisions are data driven. And if not completely data driven, they're certainly at least data informed. And if I have $100 to spend and I can know exactly what's going to happen to that $100 in bucket A, and I can maybe have a bit of an idea in bucket B, and then in bucket C, I have no idea what's going to happen. I just kind of, it's a wish and a prayer. Where do you think I'm going to put at least the lion's share of my dollars? And so I think bringing more data, more insight, more best in class kind of expertise and best practices to out of home, like we've seen the Googles and the Metas, and even in TV and even in some print media, we've seen that expertise help us be better marketers and help us do better. I mean, I drive across Toronto every day. I drive from Markham to Oakville and back every day. And every day I see 1,000,001 out of home signs that I cannot read. I can barely see. And I have no idea. And like, whether they're too far away, they're not optimized, but then you hear and see great examples. Like, I think it was it Wakeman, the funeral company, that said, text and drive, and they were provocative, but they were simple and you got it. And you could read it from probably 1,000,000 miles away. How do we work with our agency partners and work with the brands to help us be better out of home marketers? Because then combine that with analytics, we're going to get more out of it. And that's what the Googles and the Metas are doing. And we need that here too.
And now the Amazon.
And the Amazons, I mean, the list goes on, right?
I wanted to touch on the attribution component, because this data does exist out of home. We leverage spatial data and geospatial data, location data, et cetera, in a lot of our both traditional static inventory, but also into our digital and our programmatic offering. So are any of you looking at attribution campaigns? Have you, Christine, have you executed any attribution campaigns within out of home where you're understanding, the audience that was exposed to your out of home creative, and whether they went into a dealership or, whether they kind of interacted in a mobile capacity with your brand? Are you working with campaign strategies like that currently? Is this something that you need to learn more about?
Yeah, I think we need to learn more about it. Attribution is so tricky. It's such a loaded question, and I've been doing this a long time on the agency side, and last click is dangerous. Where do you go? So we look at the combination of the data, and we don't necessarily have an attribution model, but we do know once we get someone to our site, kind of the rates with which they convert and ultimately end up with purchase. And we use that as a planning model. We see when we launch some campaigns that are not directly digitally tracked, when we see spikes in things like search interest, we're like, okay, we know what's driving that, because we can kind of correlate the timing. And again, so we've built a pretty sophisticated model alongside our agency partners at Enocean to help us drive more predictive behavior. And the model gets smarter and smarter every day. But we have not been able to kind of take that to some channels like out of home yet. And I'd love to run a test and do something like that, because I think
our audience is probably chomping at the bit to get in contact with your agency now, because there certainly is some great opportunities with respect to data in the out of home space that can incorporate some of these attribution components. Jason, I know you wanted to talk about creative. I know this is something you and I had spoke about before.
Right. So I think let's spend a moment on creative. Obviously the thing that's going to drive the consumer's awareness of the advertising. So can you all talk to, or whoever wants to jump in, how important creative is and what role it plays in a campaign, and how it can be optimized, perhaps with a good example of somebody who you've seen do it really well?
Well, I'll talk about it. I think creative is obviously critical. It's critical that you don't have stale creatives creating disinterest, not only from your consumers, but also from the advertiser themselves. That is not going to lead to renewals. So I think that changing those creatives and having them change as quickly as the data is changing is just completely critical for as we move forward and out of home. And I wanted to touch real quick on attribution. I hate this question. I hate the attribution question because I think it's so difficult. When I work with these auto dealers, there's 5 reps in line trying to take credit for the sale of that Tundra. They come in and they say, it was my stuff that sold it. It was my stuff that sold it. And the truth is it's so much more murky than that. It's all these things that add to the funnel. And you can't just completely prove attribution, not with out of home, not with online. It is very difficult. And I think it's based on a lot of factors. It's based on the sales rep. It's based on just how they perceive the medium in general. I mean, it can be so many things, at least at the local level. And it's not just analytics alone. So I wanted to touch on that too.
Yeah, I think we can do a better job as an industry, creatively, truthfully, where out of home's concerned. I mean, probably in a lot of channels, but we'll talk about out of home today. You know, we use the channel, and there's times where I think I drive by it and I think, man, we got that right. You know, like, look at that, like that really stands out. You notice it, you see it. It really works in the format. And then there's other times where I'm like, I'm literally calling the agency from the highway saying, yeah, we need to do this, increase the contrast. It's not coming through quite as nice. We could use industry's help. Not just kind of accepting the next creative they receive, but actually working with us to say, you know what, we think this could be better. Here's how you could improve it. Here's how to think about it. Run some tests, look at some brand impact studies. You know, again, I hate to bring up all of the digital partners and even some of the TV partners, but that's what we're getting elsewhere. And so again, when we're going to get the support and the data that we need to understand the impact, if I only have that $100 to spend, where am I going to put it? And that's going to inform the decision. But I do think that out of home has become kind of one of the places where a lot of creative optimization, there's a huge opportunity for it. Because not just in mine, I see other creative as well. And I think, man, we're all wasting a lot of money here, so we can do better. And I think we need your help to do that.
You created best practices as well, and really sort of understanding how we can work from a brand recall study and kind of finding just not that the catchphrase of attribution, but also that recall and the impact effectiveness, which actually kind of leads into a question that somewhat has already been answered, but I wouldn't mind hearing everyone's perspective on this, in the sense of how can an ad agency that is working with an automotive client actually prove out the measurability or the efficacy of a campaign? So we talked about, you know, the brand lift studies, but is there a creative way, or is there something else other than these sort of core KPIs that you're looking at from other channels that we could bring to out of home to really help win some of those ad dollars to the media format?
I'll take that one real quick, because boy, you know, being a dealer principal, sitting on that side of the desk, I've had a lot of people come in and pitch me a lot of different things, right? I'll tell you what, the problem is that they're pitching. Fundamentally, that is the problem, all right? They come in with an air about themselves that, you know, I don't know how to run my business without them. You know, I'll tell you, maybe once, maybe twice in my entire career, someone sat down and just asked me. I got pitched 100 different things, right? But I don't need to get pitched. What I needed someone to actually ask me what my goals and objectives were, get intimate with my business, all right? And then come back to me once they intimately understand my goals and objectives, and say, hey, look, we understand what your goals and objectives are. Now we reverse engineer backwards towards that creative. And going back to that creative, I just wanted to comment one thing on the creative. Look, creative needs to be intentional. It's not very intentional. Yeah. You know, it's like we put it out there for the sake of putting it out there so we can check out the proverbial box that we did it and we can claim our co-op dollars. That's how it's been in the past. I think that there's an opportunity to change that now. And you are beginning to see that, where it's becoming more intentional, right? It's like, what is my intention behind that The intention shouldn't necessarily be to sell a car. Look, we sell cars at dealerships. We don't sell them on billboards. The intention should be to connect with someone. All right. What creative can I put out there that's going to make someone connect? Like, how can I connect with them? They're going to reach out, see that, and they're going to want to ask me a question, or if anything, maybe it's just an emotional connection. I want to get a good giggle out of it. Volkswagen was amazing for this for many, many years. When I think of, out of home marketing, I'm like, Volkswagen was like the best. I mean, from the 60s all the way through the 80s, man, they had some amazing, hilarious, just fun out of home marketing, but it connected with people. It connected with them at a generational level. Right. So anyways, I digress. Sometimes I can go on.
No, well, Jason, you were, I started to ask you a question and you answered it before I was able to ask it, which was to ask for, and I, I'd open this up to anybody, but I love the way that you're framing that about intentional creative, and I'd love to bring that down to the level in which people might remember something that they saw, or you could describe a good example of what you saw, maybe even something more recent, because Volkswagen is great, but also a more historical example where you saw really smart, intentional creative that you think just really rose above. If anybody,
even if it's not an automotive creative, I'd just like to understand like what it was about that creative that kind of drew your attention to it. I know, Christine, you talked on like the contrast of certain, colors and calling your agency and saying, we need this, but what are some of those
fairly tactical? Yeah, fairly tactical, that one. I think that there's been some great campaigns out there. It was funny. I was prepping for this this week, and I came across this article about out of home creative, which is funny because the algorithm's clearly getting me online now because I've never been served anything about out of home before. But it talked about a campaign in Toronto where it was about a spy movie, a Snowden movie, I guess, and they actually like picked up video from. I don't know if it was Young Dundas Square.
Was that Young Dundas Square?
Yeah, some kind of.
This campaign.
It was some square, and they kind of put it up on the screen and then made that the movie trailer, right? Because the movie was all about that, about surveillance. Why can't I say that word? And whatnot. So again, just kind of going out of the box with it, getting creative, getting really intentional about it, so that you can connect meaningfully. Out of home is no different than any other creative medium in what we do. Our job is to figure out what is the behavior we want to drive and how do we connect with consumers in order to get them to do that thing we want them to do. And to Jason's point, that action is not always to get them to buy a car. There's probably no bill. I want to see the billboard that can be singly responsible for getting someone to make a $60,000 purchase, because man, I want that creative every day. But it's all about kind of nurturing people along their journey and eventually getting them to that point in a combination of things. And so what is the role of that particular medium in that particular location at that particular moment, targeted to whom, and with them so that they take that next step. And that next step may just be opening their mind to a brand they didn't consider, or it might be heading into a dealership because that dealership has said something they're interested in as they've been driving by. And maybe they've been driving by that dealership every day, but something on that sign made them say, you know what, I'm going to go check them out. They sound like people I want to do business with.
It's like that emotional reaction, right? Gina, you spoke to me when prior to this particular panel, when we first met, you spoke a lot about that contextual relevance and the creative component. And I think you gave an example of how, a happy consumer who just purchased their car, they took a selfie in front of it, and, the dealership ended up feeding that through your system. And there it was as they drove out. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a really powerful sort of contextual use of digital out of home in particular.
Yes, we actually just launched yesterday a Mother's Day campaign, and we have had 150 random people now putting their moms all over billboards throughout the state right now in the last 2 hours. So it's really exciting because they're using their digital billboards like they're using their social media, which is a different conversation than we've ever had in out of home. And it's so exciting. But it goes back to that. Yes, we have auto dealers down here that are taking a photo of this girl that just bought a car, and they're saying, "Congrats, Brittany." And they, the sales rep is just putting it on the billboard literally in seconds. And theoretically, that woman can drive out of the lot and see her face on a billboard on her way home. And that's powerful. There's something about that that's more powerful than anything that they could have posted on social media. Not that it's a contest, but there is so many things that are so good about that. And Christine hit a lot of that on the head too. Like when she was saying, if I have $100, she's like, where am I going to spend that? And it makes a lot of sense. 10 years ago, when I started doing this, I was in the online world for the last 12 years is where I was selling to auto dealers. And I, in 2008, was taking the scraps because they were still spending heavily in newspaper and everywhere else. So what I have told sales reps here is, listen, go in and take the scraps, sell them a bucket of plays, take the scraps from the auto dealers, show them what out of home is capable of, the new tech that we have in this space. And then you've got 5 auto dealers spending a small amount of money. And when the next sales rep comes in, they say, oh, I already have a sales rep. And then they go back to their marketing budget and they say, okay, we want to spend more in out of home because they've proven to me that this is a relevant medium. This is something we need to move into. I just think that there's a lot of things that we could do differently in the industry to bring people back and to kind of prove to them that, you know, we're not trying to be Facebook. Like I said, we're not trying to be Google. We're never going to be, because there is a finite amount of space on these out of home screens, and it's infinite on the internet. So you're creating a lot more brand trust when you're on an out of home screen.
You know, I'm neither a out of home expert nor a marketing expert nor an automotive expert, but I do know creative. So I'm just going to add an answer to my own question, which is, for what it's worth, Christine, you made me think of this when you were talking about being really out of the box and just nurturing that customer journey. Something that I bring up all the time at Entrepreneur when we're talking about how to work with brands and come up with really creative ideas is this thing that Heineken did years ago, where they set up a board that they called Travel Roulette at JFK. And they would approach people who were walking through the airport on their way to check in. And they would say, hey, got a deal for you. If you are willing to commit to going wherever this board says, then we're going to let you play the game and it's going to give you a destination and then off you go. And you would watch people and they'd say, well, okay. And they'd hit the button and it would be, you know, Cancun or Berlin or whatever. And then they would be excited, but also confused, and they would go. And I remember that because, of course, it just captures your imagination. It makes you emotional. It puts you in the mindset of that consumer. And then you start to attach those emotions to the brand. It was just so smart. And if you haven't seen Heineken Travel Roulette, I really suggest that you do it. But anyway, I'm going to now.
Well, it's engagement, right? It's how can you take something that is traditionally a static, and if not static, marginally animated medium to actually engage people. You know, you just have to walk around Young Dundas, where I lived in New York for 5 years, and my commute kind of took me through the edge of Times Square every day, sadly. And, you know, most people just kind of mill about Times Square and never even kind of really looking up at all of these very expensive billboards until you offer someone the ability to put their face on it or type something that appears on it. And then they're all just staring at it, you know, and their phones kind of, because there's suddenly an engagement mechanism. And people, I think, just like to see their face in Times Square, but, you know, but again, it's about some kind of, just Instagram, whole business based on it. So, you know, that engagement aspect, and that 15 seconds of fame aspect, you know, you can combine those two things, it becomes really powerful.
Yeah.
Look, when I think of creative, you know, for anybody out there that's an automotive, if I say the Badger, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's probably one of the most successful campaigns that a individual dealership from a branding perspective has ever done. It was a little stuffed badger about yay big, and the Badger was a salesperson, and it was Johnson Kia was actually the name of the dealership. These videos came out, gosh, it may have almost been 20 years actually since they've come out. But if you talk to anybody in the automotive industry and you mention the Badger, they're going to know exactly what you're talking about. And it was all about, don't be badgered, come to Johnson Kia. So the Badger would go through these just series of, you know, he's sitting there eating his popcorn and someone comes up to ask him a question. He's like, I'm on my popcorn break, leave me alone. You know, and he was just a grumpy old, you know, just, you know, look, I know you got the money, sign the deal. You know, it was just these kind of things but that was the perception that people thought that it necessarily was the truth, but it was a perception of that a lot of people shared at that time and probably still do of what buying a car is like. So they built this entire intentional creative around like, let's just talk about this. Let's, you know what, this is what people think.
Very intentional.
All right.
Yeah, definitely very intentional.
It's what people think will happen when I come into it. So let's just create a little character. He's going to be the badger. He's going to badger everyone. And then we're going to just finish one thing at the end. You know, don't get badgered, come to Johnson Kia. That was it.
I do want to just transition quickly because we're getting into the time where we're going to start opening up to the Q&As. But Jason, you and I were talking before this panel, like right before this panel, and you asked an interesting question to me, which was specifically about the variance between EVs versus traditional vehicles. I think it would be really powerful if you asked that question to the panelists.
Yeah, well, I was really curious about whether there are any differences and challenges in marketing versus electric and hybrid vehicles to traditional vehicles. I mean, this is something that, in the broad consumer world, people are thinking differently about how these vehicles fit into their lives and their lifestyles and their values. But from a perspective of talking about them and marketing them, how should the industry be thinking about that?
I'll jump on that one to start. I think there's a couple of things, right? I think that there's an education gap, right? Everyone kind of functionally knows what's involved in owning an ICE vehicle. And the idea of an electrified variant, be it a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, a full EV, or even down the road, once the infrastructure is there, hydrogen, they don't know what any of that means. A friend of mine had seen that I was doing this panel, and it somehow started a whole conversation. She's like, yeah, I think my next car is going to be this or that. And then she was all of a sudden, she's talking about that her next car is going to be this. And then she's like, what is that? What does that mean? And I'm like, it was a plug-in hybrid. So I was like, she's like, oh, wait, you need to plug in a hybrid. So I was explaining it to her. So I think that there's a huge education gap that, we need to address in the marketing when it comes to the alternative powertrains, not only in kind of what they are and how they work and what that means, but also what the ownership realities are of those vehicles. People have a tendency to overestimate how far they drive. So they hear, oh my gosh, it only goes 480 kilometers. I won't be able to go anywhere. And you're like, but you only drive 16,000 an entire year. So you should be okay. But where will I charge it? What's their home situation? Do they have street parking, condo parking, house parking? How will they charge it? Where are chargers available? They have all of those questions. And then does it still need oil changes? Does it, people don't actually, we all feel like in the automotive space, this information is obvious. But the reality is people don't actually know that much about what happens under the hood of their car, and nor do they want to. But them understanding what it means to their lifestyle to drive an EV is what's important. And so how do you make that really simple for them in a way that they can understand to help them select what's the right type of vehicle for me? Because I'm a huge fan of the plug-in hybrids. I drive a long distance every day. For me and for a lot of folks, I know the plug-in hybrids are just a great solution. Kind of the notion of electricity when I want it and gas when I need it is just a great kind of anxiety eliminating aspect of it. Yet I can drive my long distance on a full EV every day and still also be fine, right? So, but I probably know more than the average person about this stuff. And so I think the major difference from a marketing standpoint is that education, and how can we do that in snackable bite-sized pieces that people can kind of take in, internalize, understand, and say, okay, this is how this fits my life. This is not going to be a burden or something I need to overcome or plan around, because let's be honest, people want to do the right thing. They recognize conceptually EVs are I always compare it to recycling, right? We as Canadians, we're pretty good recyclers. We recycle as much as the city makes us. Right. And so if you are in a town with the clear plastic bags like Guelph, where your garbage will be left and humiliate you in the neighborhood, if you have the wrong thing in the wrong bag, you recycle really well. I live in Oakville. We have a blue bin and black garbage bags. I am probably not as good a recycler as my brother in Guelph, right? And so if I get a little lazy with it, I try to be good. But again, there's no punishment for it. And so it's like, how do we make it really easy for this transition for people? I think that's going to be the biggest barrier for us.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much. We have about 12 minutes left of our time together. So I did want to move into the Q&A session. So just a quick note to any of the participants who have joined. If you're interested in asking a question to the panelists, please post it in the chat and we'll try to get through as many as possible. There were a few questions submitted before the panel, so I'll kick us off with one that came in from one of our members, Vendo Media. So Vendo is interested in understanding how you differentiate brand messaging versus dealer programs in terms of market coverage as it pertains to overall out-of-home strategy. So I think this might be a question, Jay, since you're working agency side, you could perhaps kick us off with.
It's an easy one. One's co-opable, the other one's not.
So by co-opable, you mean the dealers association groups?
Yes. So look, there are messages, unfortunately, that we can put out there that the manufacturer will actually support us in actually our spend against those messages. And then there are messages that don't follow into those guidelines. And unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of co-op. You can kind of hear in the tone of my voice. I have a tendency of calling the co-op handcuffs. But no, that unfortunately, that is the primary difference when you see a lot of dealer spend out there. You know, they're allocated a majority of their spend towards program messaging, because that's where they get additional funds from the manufacturer. They do not get funds from the manufacturer for putting out branding messages. It's unfortunate, that's just been the case.
And just a follow-up on the geographical sort of strategy, if you're dealing with a dealership program, you have to stay within a certain distance from the dealership. Is there a restriction on that? Can you talk through some of those sort of challenges and how perhaps a media owner or a publisher could help with solving some of those challenges that the agencies work through?
It is tough. It is tough geo-targeting because, you know, what you can, the circle that you can draw, you know, in a Facebook manager does not necessarily align to a dealership's PMA or a primary area of responsibility. It's, you know, instead of it looking like a circle, it could look like an octagon or something, or an oblated weird shape or something. But yeah, that is difficult to target within those PMAs. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. It's not necessarily easy. So you spend up a lot of time drawing a circle and then creating exclusions until you carve out the right space.
I've got the next one here. It comes from Branded Cities. What are the unique challenges presented by using out-of-home to advertise automobiles, and what, in your opinion, would solve this? It's a big question, but would love for some perspectives. Who wants to jump in?
I think analytics would be the biggest one. You know, when I was approached, you know, now this was years ago, when I was approached for, you know, out of home, you know, marketing when I owned my dealership, I simply could not wrap my head around just the lack of what I felt at the time was analytics. I'm like, you know what, I might as well do a newspaper ad. It just kind of felt the same way to me. Now I understand the technology has gotten vastly different. So I think that there's an educational element to, you know, what those analytics are, because, you know, I think probably from when the last time a dealership was approached, their gut reaction is going to be no. They just maybe don't know what has changed.
Yeah, and I can kind of add to that because you're exactly right. Sorry for my voice, my gosh. You're exactly right on all of that. I think that there's a lot of new, like I said, new tech. I always say that, but it will inform, it will give a notification on the dealer's phone when a vehicle has sold and come off of the billboard. There's things like this that can kind of, they're not going to prove attribution, but they're definitely going to keep that dealer engaged with their out-of-home campaign in a way that they weren't before. So I think that, you know, just measuring the success is a lot, like I always say, it's perception. So the dealer, it's however that dealer perceives that campaign to be, and you can give them all the information that you can. And that's what we try to do too, is give them all that information, show them how many times their creative has been changing and moving dynamically. But at the end of the day, it's just, are they happy with that spend, and how can we make them happy with that spend, and give them as much as possible that can compete I hate to use the word compete, but compete with all of their other ad buys.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that the metrics do matter, and which metrics matter, and being able to demonstrate impact and meaningful impact is a huge part of it. Again, I use digital as the example because I think we all agree it's the most measurable, and it's gone through in the last decade or so, a real transition from basically like all of the measurement to now starting to focus in on those metrics that matter, as we call it. So what are the things I care about? What are the things I have directly connected to business impact? And talk to me about how your channel can move those things. And I think we need to get out of home there for it to compete, because at an OEM or a dealer level, at the end of the day, the question is, what's in it for me? And it's great that the creative technology is changing. I love to hear that, because I think the more we can make something personalized and contextual, and it's going to increase that intention and that engagement. Absolutely. But if I still can't tell what it did for me, again, that's not going to be necessarily the bucket I put the money in.
The next question
to kind of help people that are trying to sell into the dealership too is, don't focus always on sales. I think a lot of people, they think the gateway into a dealership is the sales department. And I gotta be honest with you, in a lot of cases, it's not. All right. The service department behind the sales department, all right, generates more profitability for the entire dealership on a regular basis, but gets only this much of the marketing budget. So don't be afraid to bypass the sales department and go in and sit down with the service manager.
100% correct, Jason. 100%. You forget about all the other facets in these dealerships that are the money makers that you could build upon.
We have a great question that Jason, I was just going to cue you to pop in, because I think it's a really powerful question.
Yeah, so this really builds off of the last one, talking about challenges, which you guys did such a great job of, but it takes it in a somewhat different direction. I'm just going to read it. This one comes from All Vision. With the automotive market heavily impacted by economic factors such as inflation, rising gas prices, and chip shortages impacting the manufacturing and delivery of new vehicles, how are brands within the automotive category assessing the need for not just out of home, but advertising in general?
I'll jump in here, Jason. I'd love to hear what you think. I have this debate, as you can imagine, every day with dealers, right, who call me and say, Christine, why are we advertising electric vehicles? Well, we need to be known for our electric vehicles if we're going to compete, not just today, but 12 months from now. I can't play catch up later. We've got to build the brand. It's been an opportunity, but it's also been a bit of a challenge, because it's let us take a step back. Jason talked about earlier, we don't need to do the ad mats with the weekly payment, and we don't need to do kind of hardcore what we call retail advertising right now, because we're selling everything we've got, and have waiting lists for everything we don't have. But that becomes a challenge, because how do you find the right balance, right? So we can take a step back, we can look at building the brand, keep building that top of mind awareness, so that if someone is going to put themselves on a list, it's our list. But it comes with a challenge, because again, the dealers are dealing with an unbelievable amount of change to kind of their business model, and so their sales staff are increasingly frustrated, and I get it. And then they see ads on TV for cars that are 12 months out, and they're like, oh, come on, and so it's kind of a crazy time, and we are trying to be as intentional as we can, at the same time as agile as we can, so that we can respond to the market and the dynamics, and Jason, I'll use the word pivot as much as we need to, while at the same time keeping our long-term goals in mind, because we can't sacrifice the long-term to just kind of mediate the short term. So we're taking more of a long-term view when we think about the brand and our advertising strategy.
And a great answer. Thank you.
Is what's for the manufacturers true for the individual dealership too. So like at any, let's see, there are 31 Nissan dealerships I can drive to in about an hour from downtown Toronto. Just kind of put that in perspective real quick. 31 Nissan dealerships. Okay. I can place an order for a new Rogue in any one of these 31 locations. Why? Why am I choosing you? Hyundai, I think it's a little less, about 27. No, it's probably close to the same, actually. Now I'm thinking about that. I'm trying to think, try to go out an hour there, right? But like, why should I choose you? That's where the marketing dollars should go to. It's not going to be the story's not inventory. It's like I'm going to place my order. All right. I'm going to order my Kona. All right. I'm going to put a Palisade, maybe next year, but I'm going to put an order for a Palisade in. It's just, but which dealership do I choose and why do I choose them? Right. And
yeah, that's a great point. It's really building that brand affinity to ensure that you're building that sort of personal connection and that communication and that brand loyalty, of course. And you know, I think
dealers need to think that way too.
For sure. So we are rounding our time here. We're just 1 minute left. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time who joined. So thank you so much to all who joined. There was a great turnout for this particular panel. There were a few questions that we were unable to get to that were submitted through the chat. So for those of you who submitted questions that we did not answer during this live panel, then we'll certainly follow up with an email afterwards to ensure that we get your questions answered, because they're great questions. I would like to thank all of you for joining the panel. Thank you, Jason, for co-moderating with me. And I have to say, on behalf of the entire out-of-home industry, I know that we're so excited to see the automotive category take its triumphant return to out-of-home as a medium. We're certainly so thrilled. It's always been a very active category, leveraging out-of-home as a media format, and seeing, you know, the vibrant creative is going to be very welcomed for our industry. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Gina, Jason, Christine, and Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it was so interesting.
Very interesting. Thank you all who have joined, and we'll post a link on our website as well afterwards. So thank you everyone.